name's Eve Horn. I'm founder of Peak Music UK and the We Are the Unheard campaign, which is a campaign for the equality of women in the music industry. In this video, you'll see the amazing mixing and mastering engineer, Manon Grandjean, who joined me for my International Women's Day event. And you'll see her talking to members of the community about her mastering career so far and also answering their mastering questions. I'd also like to thank PMFC, who are streaming this event live to their community and have been so amazing in supporting this as well. Also, not to mention that all of the guests that have been graciously given their time today for free to support the campaign, support the cause. So thank you so much. Right now, I have with me the amazing Manon Grandjean. Thank you so much for your time. I absolutely love your t-shirt. Where did you get that from? Woohoo! Thank you so much. So today I'm going to just be asking you a few questions, and I have with us Thea Cochran and Tiva, who are also going to be asking you some questions that might be able to help themselves or someone else in the industry. So thank you again for joining us. First of all, for the people watching, I just want to know where your journey began, because not everyone might know that you have done some amazing things with the London Grammar, the Stormzy and the Dave, among many other amazing artists in the UK. So can you just start by telling us where your journey began in audio?
Well, I'll try to make it short on the journey because it's been I've been basically working in studios and the music industry for the last sort of 10 years. I had kind of a conventional sort of route into studios. So I studied in France, where I'm from. I studied audio engineering, and then I came in. Oh, my cat just decided to make an entrance. Lovely.
Love live.
So I started as a runner in a studio in North London called Livingston Studios, and sort of worked my way up as an assistant and sort of started building relationships and contacts and with people, and I also started working in a studio called State of the Art Studios, which was in Richmond in London as well. Rack Studios, which is a great studio in North London as well. And just that's what I did the sort of first 5 years of my career. I just worked as an assistant, as an engineer, as a freelance engineer. So I was doing, a lot of bands, a lot of string sessions, quite sort of varied, projects. And then sort of 5 years ago, I think it was in 2015, I met a producer called Fraser T. Smith on the session, actually. And we did a couple of sessions as a freelance. I did a couple of sessions for him as a freelance engineer in his own studio, and we got along really well. And he offered me a full-time sort of engineering for him exclusively, basically, because he is a very very busy producer. And so I said yes, and I started working for him full time, and for the last sort of 5 years, since 2015, basically from 2015 to 2020, I was his engineer. And like you said, I worked with Stormzy and Dave and a lot of hip hop artists and rappers and also like very pop artists like Mabel and Ray. And so yeah, quite a difference from coming from a freelance engineer where I was doing quite a lot of bandy stuff or indie and like more band stuff. And since last year 2020, I decided to go sort of back to be freelance again, but more into mixing and mastering. So I started mixing and getting into mixing when I was working with Fraser, and that's something that I really love doing. And I wanted to just explore that for a bit, and I've been sort of 10 years in the studios, and I wanted to sort of try something a bit different and focus on that. So that's what I've been doing sort of for the last year or so. Just I've got my own studio now, and just mixing and mastering stuff. So yeah, that's kind of that summarized a little bit.
Amazing. No, honestly, it's insane. So when you started working full time for that guy, like, how did that make you feel? I'm assuming you would have been in a male environment all the time. Did it make you feel? Did you ever feel kind of like awkward, or was the light ever shone on the fact that you're a woman?
It's really interesting because I said it before in interviews that I've been really lucky, because I've heard, and we know a lot of things are happening and that are really wrong. And when I was actually an assistant and an engineer freelancing, I I was pretty much all the time the only woman in the room, most of the time. Um, but I never felt, I don't know if it's because of the way I am as a person, or if, I don't know why, but people were not really, I never felt out of place. So people were really, accepting, and they were really surprised most of the time. They were like, oh, okay. They were really surprised, and but most people were really like, how do you say that? They were really, happy that finally there was a woman in the room with them, and he was like, this feels so great, because it feels more normal in a way, because it's how it is in normal life. When you go out in the street to the shop, there's men and women, and it's a mix of a lot of people, and that's how it should be. So everyone was really positive and really accepting. And then after, when I started working with Fraser, then I was still, mainly the only women in the room, but same again. I think, you know I was really, like, I had never had any problems with anyone, and I could be in sessions with a lot of guys, like a lot, and like maybe 10 people in there, and I never felt afraid. I never felt threatened. So I think I've been, I think, really lucky in that sense. But it's to show as well that there are people that have that, they're really accepting, and there's not all bad out there. And I think even more so now, it's going to be even safer, I think, for women to be in studios with a lot of men, and mentality are changing, and so I'm really pleased that my story is a positive one, because there's so many negative one, unfortunately, that I'm really happy that mine has been like that. So I always want to share that as well.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and I was going to say the same thing. It's really refreshing to hear that you've had. Sorry, this is a
Yeah.
thing. She gets up on there and climbs over and dives. So yeah, ignore the child in the background. It's really refreshing to hear a positive story, and I think you're right. So one of my questions to you was going to be about the change in the situations regarding the studio environment, because there are guys in the studio that do want women. I mean, this event that's happening today that is getting streamed on PMFC happened because Steve Bowman asked in the group, where are the women?
Yeah.
I had already been in and spoken to the admin of the group, Rich, and he then contacted me and asked me to become a moderator. And then I had this massive, amazing idea. I was like, oh my God, we should do a takeover for International Women's Day. I told him about my campaign, and it all kind of came from there. And now here we are. And so it is a beautiful thing. And there are males in positions of power in the studio environment that do want to see this change. So you're right, it is important that we tell the positive stories as well, and make sure that this is about working together
Yes.
to make change. And I feel like this is the beginning. And although, you know, yes, the campaign is the Unheard campaign, because we still have a very long way to go. The percentages of female producers have only just gone up to 3%. So although we're all moving in the right direction, we've got a very, very long way to go. And you know, it is nice to know that, you know, we are coming at this from an open point of view, and you know, we can have conversations in the studio environment if someone is ever, you know, finds themselves in a situation where they feel uncomfortable. And once again, the question was, is it society or is it male behavior in the studio? And I think it's a bit of both, because sometimes we feel uncomfortable just at the presence of men in the studio, because it's not because necessarily they've done anything wrong, it's just that's what has made us feel that way, due to, you know, society putting these, you know, subconscious subliminal messages to us. So even though, you know, there is still a problem, even though it might, you know, guys might not out and out like do anything bad, or you know, just a lot of men in the same environment can sometimes make you feel, you know, insecure and you know, nervous. So it's still a conversation we need to have, but I'm super, super happy. Yeah, go on, Tiva, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I was just, it was interesting listening to you talk about how things are good, and that was kind of to do with being safe. And I was thinking, well, I have two questions, but the first, I guess, is do you think being safe is sufficient, or do you think it's kind of a deeper thing about feeling respected in the workplace? And then the second question was to do with kind of where non-binary and trans people fit into this kind of category, because I think International Women's Day has brought up quite a lot of things for a lot of people this year in particular. I've seen a few kind of different posts about the inclusivity towards non-binary people and trans people. And do you feel like the studio is do you feel like there's a kind of hierarchy of the way people are treated based upon their genders, and that, you know, moving forward, would we look to be in a completely genderless space with it? Or I know that's quite a big question, but I mean, what is gender is my question as well.
But I mean, ideally it shouldn't matter at all, you know. It shouldn't, such as ethnicity, such as a lot of things. And unfortunately it can be, I think the sort of newer generations, like I think we sort of are a similar age, then we are a lot more accepting, because we're a lot more aware of all these distinctions. And I think maybe someone a bit more old school would maybe not necessarily understand. And I think that's always the problem, is when you don't understand something, that you're afraid of something for some reason, and you sort of block it out. And I think there's a lot of education to be done worldwide about you know, about gender, about ethnicity, about a lot of stuff. But I do hope that we can, in the future, it can be genderless, because like any job shouldn't matter what gender you are, anything. And the other thing that you mentioned about is being safe is enough. I think being safe in your place of work should be a given, and I think that unfortunately it's not been the case in some instances, not only in our industry, but we can see in films, we can see in a lot of other sort of artistic, industries. And I think being safe should be a given, and respected as well, because you there to do a job. You put in your time and your skills, and I think it doesn't matter at what level you are. We should all be respected, from the runner to the producer to the artist to anyone. So I think there's a lot of work to be done in all those areas, in studios, and respecting. I think it's a worldwide problem in any industries, in any job. It's so I think it's a really big question, but
just thought I'd bring a big one, just
sling
it in there.
But you're right. I think being safe and respected should be that way, regardless of your ethnicity, your gender, your sexual orientation, anything, because that's no one's. It doesn't matter. It's no one's business.
Yeah.
So that's my opinion, anyway.
Yeah.
I completely agree. That's a brilliant question. I think it's important that because whenever we say, diversity in the industry, I guess people just automatically go to women.
Mm-hmm.
It's just an automatic thing.
Mm-hmm. But there's so much more.
There is so much more to it. There's it goes on, and we need to remember that, as humans, we're creators, and music is magical, and we are all human beings capable of making this magical stuff, and that should be the level at where we stop. All of this.
Exactly. I totally agree with you.
Yeah, we've got to come together and just be creative. I was saying the other day, I feel like going back to the 50s and 60s, where everything was just like, peace and love, and focusing on the bigger problem at hand, coming together. Everyone came together and focused on the big things that were affecting lives as a whole. And I feel like hopefully through things like this we can get back to that stage, and stop focusing on these things that, for me, they're huge, but at the same time they're minor things that shouldn't be getting in the way of, they've become massive problems, and that's why we find ourselves today talking about them. But I've pledged, as of today, I'm going to stop putting the word female before producer and singer-songwriter and stuff like that, because I'm exhausted by it. It's not something we should have to do. We shouldn't have to tell other people, or have to feel the need to constantly explain ourselves, when
and also
about job description.
Yeah, and what does it mean to be female? What does it mean to be, that
exactly
that it puts a category on something that then you're like kind of living up to by a societal expectation. I'm like non-binary, so I don't feel affiliated with the term female, but I also feel like it's a kind of interesting kind of intertwining kind of space that we're all in, of just like navigating our own perceptions of gender anyway, and what it is to be female. And
that's the thing, like you're going to have your own issues by going into a space and being identified as female. That already is going to be another problem, and this is why I was saying, when it comes to diversity, we have it goes deeper than just being a woman. And I think having these conversations is so important. You know, I also said earlier in a panel, by educating ourselves, by being open to learning, we're making ourselves better human beings in general. And by being better human beings, you know, everyone benefits.
Yeah.
You know, so
100%.
that's a huge question. And thank you so much for asking that. It's super important.
No worries. Thank you so much for having me. I have to go, but I just wanted to say.
No, that's
sorry.
fine. That's why I was like, I'll get you in.
Sorry. I just got in there first with the massive question: what is gender?
Yeah.
And then I'm going to go. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me, and it's such a pleasure to speak to you, Manon. It's like
my pleasure.
Such a pleasure to meet you as well. I'm like really I've really been admiring your work for a long time.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
thank you so much, Eva.
Have a nice afternoon.
Yes, you have a great day. Thank you again. Brilliant question.
Thank you so much for having me. Bye.
Thea, did you have anything to ask Manon?
I've got like two very differently balanced questions, and one of them is kind of technical and probably quite quick, and the other one's like a bit more general. So I'll do the technical one first because it's less huge than the gender one. If someone was like coming into mastering or mixing from like an adjacent part of the industry, maybe they're already a studio engineer on sessions, or they're working in live, or they're even doing like audio posts for games, would it be possible for them to like move sideways in towards like mastering particularly, or do you think that's like there's too much new stuff to learn?
I don't think there's I think there's always a bit of a learning curve anyway when you sort of decide to do something, you know, a little bit out of your usual sort of day-to-day that you really used to and you sort of that you really know. But I think there's never anything that you can't do, because especially if you've been in sort of sound already, you know the principles and things like that. And I think there's so much resources online or with other people, you know, that you can sort of learn from and do your own experiments as well to see what works for you, like take on things that you can find and then sort of find your way as well. I think you can always do that, definitely. And that's what's great as well, that you're not sort of restricted to something, if that makes sense, you know. So I definitely think you can. And there's a lot, like mastering, there's a lot of info out there about it, and some mastering engineers are really open as well to discuss with, you know, people that are up and coming to help them, and if they have questions and stuff like that. Like on a funny anecdote, and she's coming in today. One day I posted a question on the page on Facebook. I think it was on Produce Mix Fix and Conquer, and Mandy Parnell replied. She said, "Give me a call." So I was like, "Are you sure?" and one morning they say, "Yeah, just give me a call on Facebook." And so I said, "Okay." So then I just called her and asked her, "So what do you think should I do if I want to do a 96K mix master?" And then we started chatting, and we met briefly once, but we never actually sort of officially met and hang out and stuff. So I was like, "Are you sure this is okay? You know, I don't want to take up on your time and stuff." So I think there's really great people around that you can learn from, and yeah, definitely if it's something that you want to do, just don't be afraid to do it, I think.
Do you think that's the thing in audio generally, that everyone assumes that everyone else is like super busy and will have no time, when actually they might be quite open to getting little messages that they can just quickly help with?
I think in general everyone is busy. I think it's true that a lot of people are busy, but you find the time. You know, you find the time if you want to do it. If you want to you know, help someone out, or if you want to answer some questions. Like, I'm super busy, but sometimes I see some questions on forums and I'm like, I reply back and I try to help, and you know, you can do as much or as little as you can, but you know, I do think that a lot of people are taking the time to help others.
Thank you.
Thank you, Thea. No, I completely agree. I mean, if you just look at the day today, Manon's kindly given us her time, and so has all of the other mastering engineers that we have throughout the day. They, like, when everyone gave up their time, I'm literally like, if I still can't believe it's happening. Like, I still can't believe I'm sitting here talking to Manon. She's wearing one of my T-shirts. Like, I'm like, I'm just literally like, I remember writing it out, like, and I was like, I know this name. And I was just like, what? You know? And yeah, I feel like I'm living in a dream, but at the same time, it's amazing because I have to just kind of be open to the fact that things that are happening are beyond my control. And this isn't about me. This is about us. Okay? And the reason why I wanted to do today is to be able to be a voice for the women who are already smashing it in their careers, like Manon, like Mandy, like Piper, showing the people that are up and coming, the people that are at university, that there are things that are happening, you know. And it's the same with having Steve on board and Tony as well. Like, there are things happening, and there are also guys that want to help. You know, there is movement being made, and together we can really make massive change, and we can get the percentages up where they should be. So yeah, I think it's about being open and not being scared to ask questions, because I remember, you know, when you're insecure about, you know, no one's going to want to, you know, just do it. All they can say is no.
No, exactly.
You know, and you say, oh, thank you anyway. But I've learned from when I came back into the music industry like 3 years ago, two of the things that I decided, one was to be open to absolutely everything, and two was to enjoy it and have fun, because I was putting too much pressure on myself to be perfect, to, you know, I wasn't good enough and all of this stuff. And it's not true. We're all good enough. And by putting yourself out there, you're already making the first step. Making the first step to making change, you know. And we're having the conversation now. And if we keep having the conversation, not just today, every day, in our own little ways, you know, we talk to our neighbour, we talk to someone else over lunch about what we did, and the conversation we had, it keeps going, you know. It's like an invisible chain of conversation that we can continue to have outside of today. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and I think also when I was sort of 16, obviously times were a bit different then, because it was the sort of the beginning of internet and stuff. So, but there wasn't obviously social media, and you didn't have access to anyone that you sort of looked up to. So you didn't really know who was, apart from books or for interviews or stuff in magazines, but there wasn't such an open, like, dialogue that there is now with people that you admire, you know, men or women or whoever. So I think I think it's really important to those type of things like today, to inspire, you know, younger people to get into the industry and not be scared, and they can look at your experience and stuff like that. And it's stuff that I didn't have when I got into it, and I'm really glad that now, me or someone else, it's available for them, and that's really important for me as well.
Yeah, 100%. I kind of, with the campaign, I'm doing the same thing. I'm making myself visible for, you know, anyone, anyone who I can inspire. And I mean, I had, when I was at uni, about 2000 and something, I did my dissertation on the lack of sound engineers in the music industry, and I could barely write the dissertation because there was no evidence. And it was around the same time, there was hardly any social media, Facebook was
Mm.
just starting up, and
Yeah.
and you had to go out and network. And I remember when I started my studio, we were trying to promote female producers, and it was near on impossible. We worked with the Prince's Trust, and we worked with like young people, and you know, I mean, we got as far as talking to a TV production company about doing a kind of fly on the wall documentary with Missy Elliott, because she was the only person at the time that, as a female producer, that we could identify. And I was already 25 then. Do you know what I mean? So when I was before that, there was nothing in terms of singers. Yes, loads. Songwriters, producers, engineers, none. So like Manon said, we are so lucky now to have role models like Manon, like Mandy, like Piper, like Steve and Tony, who are the right kind of people in the industry. They're open, they're inclusive, and they want to help. You know, it's just so nice. You know, it's not anything to do with sex or gender or anything like that. The fact that they're actual beautiful human beings that want to help make change is this is the level that we need to be looking at. Yeah, that's how I feel.
Agree. Yeah, definitely.
So
there was I remember there was a Imogen Heap, actually, that was, she was like putting some, it was like early YouTube days, she was like putting videos, I think, like on the she had a, I think maybe a necessarily, if I remember properly. I mean, it was a long time ago, but she was actually one of the kind of pioneer a little bit, and then she still does now, tries to push stuff. But yeah, I love.
Funny, we were in a
really admire her.
Me and her were in the gospel choir together at the Brit
Oh.
School years ago. But once again, though, unless you're looking for her, you know, it's about when you're young and you don't know where these female groups are supporting women.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes people don't want to be seen on social media and stuff, so they don't have a lot of presence. So you know, you won't necessarily see her. So all people are seeing are all the guys in the charts with the songs in terms of songwriters and producers. And I was saying before in one of the panels, they were basically saying, you know, why is it that people still generally choose males when it comes to singing and songwriting and stuff? And I basically say, because it's human habit. You know, if we're conditioned to basically say that's all we're seeing, hang on, bum, then subconsciously that's what we do. We're like, oh, you know, all we're hearing is male voices on the radio, so obviously men are better at singing or, you know, writing songs. And so I was saying, like, on a conscious level, as anyone who's working with an artist, think before you write your song about the type of vocal you want on it. Why? What is this? You know, and just try and change it up a bit. And I think having the conversations mixed with our actions and just having, you know, thinking a little bit more and just being a bit more conscious of these things will help make change. I think we're all responsible for our day-to-day behaviour.
I actually wanted to add to that as well that I recently sort of, because I always sort of like look for like learning platforms online about, you know, mixing and stuff, and I'm not going to mention the name because I don't want to, you know, name and shame people. It's not really a thing. But so I went on the website and they have mentors or whatever. Not one woman. So I'm thinking. So I look at all the guys that are on there. They're amazing, no question about that. They're very experienced mixers or mastering engineer. They are fantastic. But I think in those type of situations, like you said, is the people that are creating those platforms, or, you know, or someone that wants to produce a track, they go to those go-to people because they they've been there for a long time. You know that what they're going to do is going to work, is going to be great. So you don't, so those, there's no looking further. So that's why there's always the same name being put into the mix, and those guys are amazing. There's no denying it. So you know that, for example, if you go to this mixer, whatever, you know you're going to have an amazing mix. But then, so you're not looking further from that. And I think that's also something that those platforms need to address, that they need to, oh, well, we have so and so and so, so they know they're going to have viewers, they're going to have people subscribing because they have big names. But that's not good enough anymore, because you have to dig a bit, and then if you dig, you find. I'm not even talking about myself. I'm in my opinion, I have so much to learn, and I'm not even to that level. But there are like the women mastering engineer that winning Grammys, and you're like, well, where are they on those mentoring sites? It's like, there's a big difference in numbers. So there's always going to be more men than women, but at least make an effort to at least put one on there, because there are some that you can put on there. So that's, I think that's also something, like you said, this is a really conscious effort for people creating platforms or creating content or creating tracks, record labels, everyone, to sort of be like, okay, well, let's not go to the go-to guys that we've been going to for the last 20 years. Let's open the scope of people a bit, because there are amazing people in there. And so that's only one thing that I wanted to add to that.
I completely agree. And I was saying as well this morning, the kind of the way that people say, okay, you can get into the industry by who you know. That mentality of getting in by who you know, I think also needs to stop, because that, once again, you're following the same pattern. Any females or people that identify as female that want to get in the industry then feel that they have to, do specific things to get seen or to get known, because they have to kind of, look good to the person who's going to give them their career. Mm-hmm. And, that's just been the culture of the industry for so many years. Is who you know, and that's how you get in, rather than being done on merit. And yeah, I think that has to change too, because and going back to what you said about the lack of women on the mentor things, it's the same with universities. I was saying on the panel I was on this morning, when you create a prospectus and you want more women to join your university, be aware of what you're putting on that prospectus. What is the language you're using, what images are you using? Because if you've just got guys at a mixing desk, or you don't really need to say anything. You're basically saying no women allowed, or so things like that. When I do my walkthroughs on kind of software and hardware on YouTube, and I'm looking for tutorials, it's one of two things I see: white males that are kind of like more nerdy, or you got the black hip hop guys that are just like and then I'm like, I just want to learn this, like someone tell me what it is, and before 10 minutes in then you finally get to something that's like way over worded, and you can't really understand what they're saying because they're just too techie, or they're just talking about themselves. And then you've got a handful of women doing walkthroughs. Where are the women of color? Where are the non-binary? Where are all the people? And like I said, it's a start, but we need to keep having the conversation.
I think it's funny that when I was a kid, I used to read all the credits every time I bought a CD and stuff, and I'd know the names. And the thing is, now we've got a position where I can take those credits and look them up and see what else they've done. No one's buying music that way, so no one's seeing the credits.
Yeah, I do. Do you know what? It was one of the things I miss so much about buying music. It was my most favourite thing, to buy a record or a CD, literally open the booklet and see
Yeah.
who wrote, who produced. You know, it was like when it moved, I actually felt a bit like heartbroken, and I was mourning that habit that I loved doing when I bought a piece of music. You know, it was important to me, and it's gone. So I agree, you know, it gave you that little bit more of an insight as to who was behind the scenes.
Because I know when I've been lucky enough to do studio work and I've met someone and I've gone, oh, I know stuff that you did because I read it all on the credits. And yeah, it's quite a nice feeling for the person as well, I think, to get recognized.
Yeah, 100%.
I mean, the credit subject is a whole different, I think, whole of, you know, because of proper credits and things like that. But I know there's stuff going on behind the scenes to sort of, because we went through a really bad, you know, when we did the transition from CD to sort of online, that all that got a bit lost. And I think now in the recent years, there is people are thinking, okay, how do we, well, at least have credits somewhere, and you know, that are available and stuff like that, and they are correct as well, and making sure that, you know, not the studio stuff is not overlooked and things like that. So I know that that's happening. It's a conscious effort from some people to be able, okay, well, we need to sort out this crediting, because now a lot of people work on records. It's not like, you know, there's a lot of people involved, and I think at any level, you know, having a credit on something is very valid. You know, whether you're the assistant or you're the producer, it's even probably even more important when you're the assistant, because you're trying to build up your portfolio of stuff that you worked on. And I think, you know, yeah, proper credit is another battle.
Completely. And this is what I mean. The more I'm talking about this subject, the more I'm like, this campaign is just the start, you know, because there are, yeah, we're starting off with women being unheard, but like you said, there are so many different sectors that are unheard, that come under the same thing. You know, I'm ready to start, you know, and it can go as far as, you know, mental health. You know, there's so many people that feel alone, or, you know, they don't have someone to talk to, or a supportive network. So that's just me kind of thinking, like, there's bigger things that we need to do. I think Eris is joining us now. I don't think she's been able to get into the chat. While she's joining us, is there anybody who would like to ask Manon any questions? Please feel free to put the questions in the chat. Hey, Eris, you made it.
No, I think I've just had a bit of a technological nightmare.
No worries.
I've been watching all the time going, why are these ladies not letting me into today?
Yeah. I was like, did you get the link? Did you?
I've got so many questions as well. I've got so many questions.
Fire away. The floor is yours.
I love the blue background. I should have something like this. This looks so good.
I've got a rainbow baby.
That's awesome.
Around the screen.
So, being a witch myself and mastering being as part of the dark arts, as they say, I was wondering, what kind of secrets can you tell us? Because I've been working on an album recently, my own album, which I've now given over to Kate Tavine. I don't know if you know Kate Tavine.
Yeah, I do.
Because she mastered a single of ours separate to the album for this other project, and I heard it back and I was like, girl, I've got to up my game because I'm not on her level right now. And I was listening to it and I was really taking it apart, and one of the things that I noticed, and I never thought about before, was the fact that when it goes to big choruses, I've noticed, and I could be wrong, what I think she does is she takes the spectrum on the frequency chart and brings it like this, and then really focuses on that and gives it a big push. So she takes out a lot of bass and a lot of highs. So off the top of my brain, I can't say exactly what the frequencies are and stuff, but is there any dark arts you can share with us? That's my message, I guess. Is there anything you can tell us that's like, it's like you've gone, oh my God, like this is one of the reasons why this person's awesome at what they do?
I mean, there's a lot of tricks.
Don't give away all
First of
your
all,
secrets.
thank you for your question. But I know Katie, she's great, and I think there is a lot of stuff. Like, obviously, I think what you mentioned is basically sort of really low end and really high end information. That even though we can't maybe hear too low, like I don't know, 15 hertz or 20 hertz, that still takes a lot of headroom in your sound card converters and all of that. So by shaving that off, you getting rid of that extra information that's not essential, because the sort of, like they say, the meat and potatoes is more in the sort of mid-range. And by taking that slightly off, you're gonna have a big boost of level, because you're gonna have a lot more headroom to push things up.
Clarity as well. I find
clarity. So
yeah.
So that's one trick. There's another trick that a lot of mastering engineers do, is kind of a similar thing, that when they get a mix out into analog gear, and then when they go back in to whatever software they're using, when they convert it back from analog to digital, they clip it. So basically it's the same thing. They're sort of shaving off really high peaks that are in the sort of intersampled domain that you don't really hear or need, but they're still obviously taking headroom in your when you sort of going back in. So they shaving that off. So then you effectively have, instead of having really high peaks, in your waveform, you see that a bit more. The peaks are really a lot closer than your average level, and then that allows them to, on the back end, either bring it all up or limit it a bit more, so that's how you achieve loudness without squashing stuff.
It's really interesting, because it's kind of, when you think about it, because I come from a musician background, you want things to be louder and more wall of soundy, but it's actually counterintuitive, if that makes sense. Kind of going the opposite way, and it's like you turn your brain around.
Yeah, it's so like there's a lot of psychoacoustics thing. You're sort of tricking your brain. Like the big thing now is to have really loud in like pop and stuff, is having really loud masters, but they still sound dynamic. So how do you do that without?
And also, just to ask you a question here as well. Do you listen for the key of the song, and do you play with the exciters in that as well? Because I found myself starting to do things like that, but I don't know if that's going too far, because that's the thing with mastering, you can go too far.
I think that maybe is a bit. I've never really seen someone do that at mastering. Obviously, when you sort of at production stage or mixing stage, you can get, I would usually sort of look at the sort of lower frequencies, depending on the key, and then if I want to have a bit more bass, I would know which frequency to boost to stay in key. But I think on at mastering you could still do that, I guess, but you have to go with a really light hand, I think, when you obviously working on a 2-track. Otherwise you can really mess what's already there.
Go too far.
I think so.
But sorry, I'm just reeling out loads of questions, because I've been going this one.
Go on.
So, being an experienced mastering engineer such as yourself, how do you keep up to date with the new technology when it comes out? How do you find the time, or does someone message you? Is it dynamic through that, or are you checking certain websites that we should know about?
I mean, I'm probably out of date on so many things. But yeah, I do like I mainly mix more than I master. I think I just sort of got into mastering as well, but I think that let's say maybe I sort of mix 80% of the time and sort of master 20%. So I'm not really a full-time mastering engineer like Katie, for example, but
we're mixing then, the same question really. It's
yeah. But yeah, I think it's just looking. I'm part of like a few groups on like Facebook and stuff, and just, you know, there's always like interesting, sometimes very nerdy, but you know, you sort of, you know, take and leave whatever you want, I think, and that's really important to sort of to being open to other people's workflow as well, because you can always learn something, and even if maybe you know, there's a lot of stuff that I watch as well. I watch a lot of content online, either YouTube, and again, sometimes you have to take it with a pinch of salt, but you know, I think you take maybe little ideas and little things and just try it out and see what works for you. And see what works for you. And like, there's one platform that I do like, because they have quite really good sort of mix tips. It's called Mix with the Masters. So, and they do have really interesting content. So I do, when I can, just learn from that as well. And you know, sometimes it's even as simple as another engineer that I'll follow post on Instagram. You know, we all like to put, you know, stories with like plugins or gear that we're using, and I think sometimes you're like, oh, what is this? And then you sort of look it up and demo it, and sometimes it's like, I don't really like it, and sometimes like, oh, actually that is quite good. So I think it's just keeping ears and eyes out on like a lot of things, but that takes time for sure. That takes time.
Have you checked out the new SSL plugin that's just been released? Through SSL, it's really, really good. Like,
nice. I mean, again, like, I'm probably like, there's probably so much stuff that goes unnoticed because you can't keep up on everything. It's way too much. But you know, sometimes have a little bit of a sort of look around for like an afternoon or something on what's, you know, what to try to sort of get out of your usual, you know, things that you use. I think it's a really healthy thing to do.
And just on this then, so would you find that when you're mastering, are you mastering more towards the audience listening on a phone, or are you mastering for people listening at a club, or are you going in between, or what do you find yourself doing?
For me, it could be totally wrong, a way of thinking, but this is my way of thinking, and I want to, when I master a track, I don't really do a lot of club tracks. So I think if you're mastering for clubs, I think there's definitely stuff that you need to, you know, take in account and be sure that, you know, it translates in mono and all that stuff. But for me, when I do things, I think it's probably maybe people listening on their phone, but I think most of the time it's people listening on headphones or on the, you know, stereo system. For me, I just want it to sound the best it could be, you know, on a nice system, but also translate on the phone, so make sure the bass is coming through on smaller speakers and stuff like that. But overall, I want someone that, if someone is making the effort to put headphones on, to really listen to the track and be really enjoying it, to have a great experience. And that's you know, my way of approaching stuff. I want it to sound the best it can be. So not losing the vibe of the mix, basically. No, yeah. And then if it doesn't translate that well in mono, well, that's too bad. I don't, you know, I don't mix in mono. So I mix in stereo. So I want the master to sound good in stereo, not sound good in mono. And another question. So if anyone wants to interrupt me, it's totally fine. I'm just... no, it's all good. Do you prefer compression, or do you prefer to use to gain ride?
What would you prefer? Or is it depending on the track?
Oh, I think as a rule, I don't tend to compress that much overall or individual things. This is also due to the fact that usually stems that I get, they're already quite processed. Usually the producer or the artist or whoever sort of sending me the stems, they usually got it to a point where they're really happy with how it is, and then they want me to sort of raise it up a bit. And I think most of the synth and all and samples and stuff like that are already quite heavily processed. So I think there's not much need for a lot of compression. I still use it on vocals obviously, but it's a mix of the two. I do if for anyone who use Pro Tools, I do clip gain a lot of stuff, so I even things out. Then I would compress, and then I would also write with automations. So there's like sort of 3 different steps instead of, and all of them is very light instead of having one compressor that's just slamming it. I think there's a lot of that's going on now, is like doing a lot of little steps.
Yeah, to make a big difference.
Without having just one thing that does a lot.
Sorry, I'm going to jump in there. I heard quite a lot of mastering engineers recently saying that same thing, like doing little layering, multiple compressors. Or it's really interesting. I wanted to know, like, when it comes to like trap and stuff like that, the hi-hats. How do you like? I love snares and hi-hats and stuff. Like, how do you get that sound?
Well, I think a lot of it comes from parallel compression more than actual compressing the elements, because you don't, in trap or hip hop or you still need to have those transients. You can't squash stuff that much, so it's all, you have to find a way to make it loud and present without compressing it too much. So it's parallel compression and parallel distortion. That's the thing.
Another question I've got.
and I use a lot, and I do use a lot of parallel compression all over all the elements, all the in all mix, like various ones, and a lot of distortion. And it can be like, it doesn't have to be like a really fuzzy distortion. It can be like tape distortion, for example, like very soft. But yeah, that's the usual thing, is sort of like parallel stuff.
One of the best pieces of advice I ever got in terms of music production for my own stuff, for example, if I'm doing stuff in terms of in the box, is to run it back out through some of my guitar pedals, like my big fuzz pedal, including my vocals, and having the top end like really nice distortion rather than digital distortion.
Yeah, well, that's exactly that. Is that kind of, when I say distortion, it's not digital distortion exactly. It's musical analog-ish distortion, because in the box it's not really analog, but it sort of emulates analog distortion. So what you would do running through a tape machine or a pedal or even a tube compressor, it's all that brings harmonics, that brings distortion.
Yeah. Cool. Another question I've got is, how do you deal with? So sometimes I work with. Well, I do a lot of work in Leeds, which is where I'm based at the moment. And there's a studio called Greenmount Studios, and when we go there, like, they work with big artists like yourself. And a lot of the time there's these big chains of emails going through between the manager, the PR company, and it's like, there's a lot of bureaucracy going on about decision making on the track. How do you get that? Do you come across that, and how do you deal with it, and how do you make the decisions? Make sense?
Yeah, it does. I think there is obviously when you've got an artist signed to a label, there's a lot of people that are sort of overseeing projects, and they are giving their opinion on tracks and things. I think it's, for me, I never really had too much of a problem, because usually those decisions are made at the production stage. I think when when it comes to the mix, usually it's either the A&R and the artist manager and the artist and the producer. So it's at least 4 people are sort of listening to the mixes and are like, okay, but they usually agree on most of the things. So it's never been really painful. But I've been in situations where I was actually engineering sessions, and I could see the sort of the, sometimes if the artist wants to go a certain way and likes what the producer is doing, and they're sort of, working with the producer, and then, they maybe work on like 3 or 4 days on the track and they're super happy, and then that goes to the label, and suddenly they're thinking radio, they're thinking commercial aspect, they're thinking all of that. And sometimes there's a bit of a battle between usually A&Rs or the label and maybe the artist and the producer. So sometimes, either the track has to be reproduced, or the track gets not used because it's not, no one can agree on the best version and stuff. So there is a lot of a lot of people involved that want to be, that have opinions. So is it good, is it not? I don't know.
Do you have a mastering engineer that you can say that you really look up to, and you constantly check their stuff out and compare yourself to, and think like they're just on a level that you just like, I don't know, you're just really interested in hearing their new stuff all the time, and they're an inspiration to you, maybe? I don't know. Do you have anyone like that in mind?
I mean, there are a few. Mandy Parnell for a start. There's also a mastering engineer called Matt Colton. He works at Metropolis. Is very good. There's, I think it's maybe I'm more sort of towards the actual song. Sometimes I really like a song, so I'm like, oh, who did this? And I usually find that it's people that I really like their work. So I think it's probably a combination of the artist and the song and whoever mixed it and mastered it that makes me feel like, oh, I like that. Who's done that? But yeah, there are a few. But I'm very. I try to sort of. I think there's a lot of mastering engineers are different ways to work as well. So it's just like really interesting to look. The differences between them as well, what they do, and so yeah.
And would you ever find yourself, because a lot of mixing engineers that I know, they're really open to just messaging each other and going, I really like what you did there. How did you do that? Do you do anything like that, or are you open to that?
If someone asks me what I did, I'm always really open to say what it was, and I tend to not message other people that much, because I'm always, aware of their time, and I don't want to come across as sometimes, people can think that you want to steal their secrets, and so you have to be sort of careful how you come across, and so I'm always very respectful of their work, and I think if they want to share it, then it's great, and I think if they, I tend to not sort of message people personally a lot to ask how did you do this or that, because I don't want to be stepping in on their toes, and some, you never know how they're going to react to it. So
if I message you, there's not going to be any problems.
no, you can message me, no problem.
I'm just interject there, guys. I just wanted to open up and see if there's anybody watching who wants to ask Manon any questions before we wrap up, because I think we're we're a bit overdue, but if that's okay.
Okay, that's all right. Yeah, no problem. Yeah.
So yeah, if there is anyone watching that would like to ask a question, please do so in the chat. Raise your hand, and we will get your questions answered. I have one for you, Manon. It's a bit different. So I know that you studied acoustics and engineering at uni. Look at that child, sorry. And,
love it.
I just come here. So I know you studied that at uni. So my question is, do you think people, I mean, you don't have, this is just your opinion, you know, do you think being at uni helped you in your career, or do you think you could have got where you got equally as going straight into a running position at a studio? I'm only asking because personally I spent 14 grand at uni, and I always say that it was a private one. I spent that money to meet my business partner, because sometimes I think it's better to just get into the industry and learn on the job. So I just want to know your perspective on that.
I am really happy that you're asking me this, because I've asked myself that question a lot. So I've got yes and no. So that's not going to really answer it, but I'll say why I think yes and why I think no. The first one is that yes, if you are, because remember that I studied in France, and the price of studying for me was about £4 a year. So and it's, you know, I won't get too much into it, but it's because my parents were under the threshold and stuff. But even if you have, let's say, rich parents or whatever, or you are above the threshold, it's about £400 a year in state university. So it's really, I think if you have that opportunity to study something without going into debt, without going into financial struggles and stuff like that, I do think that it's a really a great learning, because you learn, well, for me anyway, when I studied, it was quite strict. So you had to show up in class. It's not like you could come in and out whenever you pleased. You know, it was quite strict. So it gives you discipline. You obviously learn about, you know, the job that you want to do, and you learn the sort of fundamentals of, you know, recordings, and so you learn a lot of things. And I think it's very, very, very valid. Obviously, when I arrived here and I was a runner, I'll
keep going.
Keep going.
Potty training.
I love it. So yeah, when I got into the studio and I was a runner, I was a bit surprised, because I was like, oh well, I studied 5 years and then I'm at the sort of bottom of the chain in a way. I'm not even touching the mixing desk or plugging anything in. But I do think that those years of studying made me understand what was going on a lot quicker than if I didn't study. So I understood signal flow, you know, really well, and like I could really absorb a lot of things super quickly, and I think that really, really helped. So that's the sort of yes part. Yes, it's worth it. The sort of no part is, you know, if I got in, because I had to have a degree before I did my 3 years of uni, so I basically studied 5 years. If I got in to the studio 5 years earlier, you know, I maybe would have, you know, even without the sort of background knowledge that I had, I would have learned on the job and maybe progressed a little faster. but you know, I think you have to decide what works best. And I think maybe when I started studying, I was a bit young, and you know, you sort of mature, you know, you get a bit of maturity and a bit more confidence, and so it's not maybe a bad thing to study, and then you feel a bit more prepared going into the real world. You know, it really depends on your personality and stuff. But I said there's some, I would say that there's a lot of pros and some cons, obviously, but I often wondered, but I don't think there is a black or white answer of yes, it's the best way to go is to study, or yes, the best way to go is just to go in the industry and just learn on the job, because I don't think there is it's not that simple, I don't think. And I really had a good time at uni, so you know. I think it's, you know, it's a good fun. You can sort of learn and make mistakes without that much pressure as well, because it's all in a educational scale. So, you know, so that's the answer to that.
And it's worked out well.
But
for
also,
well,
it worked out okay for me. But I think also if I had to pay 40 grand, I probably wouldn't have studied, because I couldn't have done it.
yeah.
You know? So it's the sort of education system is another big discussion.
You don't want to know what I just had to deal with, right?
Oh no.
Wow, I do apologise. I was listening. I've got a question for someone who's watching. Do you have any advice for people coming out of uni trying to make it as a producer?
I actually mentioned that before.
Okay.
That I think if you want to be a producer, I think the best way is to set up your own studio, either at home or, you know, either in a space if you can rent it, and definitely try to build up you know, your portfolio that way. I think someone asked me if you come out of uni and you want to be an engineer, maybe it's a slightly different route, you know. But yeah, definitely if you want to be a producer, I don't think sort of interning nowadays, I don't think interning into studios and stuff, if you want to be a producer, is not the way to go. And also the other thing would be to maybe look at actual producers that are maybe looking for an assistant, or, you know, like I remember the producer I was working with, obviously he had me, but sometimes he would have an assistant to help him doing production stuff. So I think that's you know, working with someone that's busy and that needs a bit of help, usually as a writer producer, that would be a good way to go as well, I think.
Is there any projects or artists you are working with recently that you can share? Ooh, I love your eyebrows, by the way. I'm like, yes. Look.
There's a lot going on. Some of it has been out already, but I'm working with Neo, which I absolutely love. So I've already mixed 2 other tracks that are already out. But yeah, so I'm working more with her, which I'm so excited about. So yeah.
Amazing. Any more questions? Please feel free, raise your hands and put them in the chat, the Q&A section, and we can answer them for you. Okay, I don't think there's any more questions coming in.
Oh, good. That was quick.
That was quick, wasn't it? Yeah, have you got anything else you'd like to ask Manon?
I think you had another question.
Yeah, I remember.
You had 2 questions.
I think I had. This is really like just silly and just something I'm interested in about people in general. But what was it that like obsessed you when you were young?
Oh, I wasn't, because I was basically trained on classical guitar, so I wasn't really clued up much on like recording and stuff when I was like a teenager or a child. But my parents were into music a lot, so my mum was listening to opera, and we actually went to the opera a few times, and like I was just in music a lot. I played piano, guitar, harp, so I was really into that musical bubble in a way. So that sort of, when I sort of went into engineering fairly late. So I think it's when I was 18 that I went into a studio in France and I realized what it was and what the engineer was doing and stuff. But I wasn't like recording stuff at home and doing, stuff like that. I was just loved music.
Thank you.
Oh, so polite. Any more questions before we wrap up? I think I'm going to allow one more, then we're going to let Manon get on.
That's all right. All good.
Next question. Have you got any videos of you playing the harp? I love the harp.
I've got photos, not videos. It was, when I think I was maybe 8 or something, the sort of, obviously there was no videos on phones and, you had to have a camoscope or something. So I've got pictures.
Oh, cool. I once seen a video, I've seen a video of Johnny Newsom and I was like, oh my God. I was like, this is one of the best instruments, but the hardest instruments to play.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I only played, I think, 2 or 3 years of it, but it's a beautiful instrument.
Stunning.
I'll put a picture up for you.
Yeah, please do.
Maybe you should start doing some videos of like the instruments you used to play as well, just when you have time, of course. Okay, I'm gonna wrap it up there. I just want to thank Manon so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
My pleasure.
Amazing conversation. It's really, humbling and beautiful to know that, there's people that are of your caliber in the industry who are so down to earth and care about what's happening, and it's really, really beautiful to know. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Getting a t-shirt and supporting the campaign. Woohoo! Honestly, thank you. I'm like, no, I'm going to bed smiling tonight. Seriously, thank you.
Amazing.
Honestly, thank you, Thea and Aries, for asking such.
Thank you for great questions.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant, and thank you again to Shona, who is managing everything behind the scenes.
Yes.
So I would like to thank everyone else who's watching. Once again, we are doing this to support the equality of women in the industry, to champion the women that are already doing an amazing job, and to pass the baton to the upcoming women. So if you want to support the campaign, you can head over to peakmusic.uk, which is my website, get a t-shirt and get behind the campaign. But thank you so much, Manon. Have a fantastic rest of International Women's Day.
Yes.
And
you
keep
too.
doing amazing things. We love you.
Love you guys.
Thank you.
Ciao.
See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.